All right, friends, this is Jared Dodd. Welcome you back once again to the Blessed Family Podcast. I am here outside, beautiful day in May in Minnesota with Rory Groves, author of Durable Trades, founder along with his beautiful wife, Becca, and his family of Gather and Grow Ministry. And we've just wrapped up 2 days of the Farm and Family Fair,
That's right.
which were awesome. We're a little tired.
Yeah.
But it's a good kind of tired.
Good kind of tired.
And so today we're going to be talking about the family economy.
Yeah.
Family economy. Yeah. And if you're anything like me, before you heard, well, it's just like anything, before you hear it, you have no idea.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And so this man's vision is for family economy, turning the hearts of fathers to the children. And tell us about that, man. Let's just start out with what is the family economy? What does that even mean? It sounds like something dealing with the market, but you're doing it with a family, like maybe families, trading stocks and bonds.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not personal finance. It's not the family budget. The family economy is this idea that the families originally, before the modern time that we live in, the family was the source of all production. Actually, historians would write about that before the Industrial Revolution, every family was a self-producing and self-sustaining community. I mean, if you think about what it takes for a whole town to come together and to produce something that it needs just to survive, that used to take place in every family in this country. And in a lot of places in more primitive cultures around the world, it still operates that way. But in our modern times that we live in now, we've specialized and hyper-specialized. People aren't generalists now. They specialize in this very narrow trade or a very narrow career. And they do that one thing very well. And they spend a lot of years of education in order to be able to do those things. And they can command very high salaries. And there's a lot of benefits to some of the hyper specialization. But on the flip side, we don't have the broad skill sets that every human being used to have for all of time, which was growing your food, making your own clothes, building your own shelter, the food, fiber, shelter. These were things that all of our ancestors could do.
Wow.
If they were pressed into it. But today we're so specialized that we're not even aware where our food comes from most of the time beyond the grocery store shelves. So anyway, the idea of the family economy was this self-producing community, this ancient, stable way of life that people used to make the things they needed, rely on each other in those relationships, and it all came forth from the family. It wasn't this gross domestic product or international global supply chain or these huge international companies, global, multinational global companies. It wasn't these woke companies that are, all of these things, stock markets and the traders and all these things. That wasn't the economy. The economy was the family. And all of society rested on that basic building block. So the goal of the ministry that we're involved in right now is helping to rebuild that essence of the family. And that just starts when people work together. And so that was kind of the basis of a big change in my life when I started to move away from that hyper specialization into what can we do together as a family in the modern age? Because this is totally against the grain. But I want to build those relationships back up with my sons and daughters, with my wife. I want to be yoked up going somewhere in the same direction. And 20 years from now, I don't want to be sitting at the same desk, staring at the same screen, wondering if all the time that I put into writing code is going to amount to anything. I want to have something tangible to show for my time here on Earth. So we can get into a little bit about that, but that's the basic idea of the family economy.
So tell me, so for your personal story and experience, you were that guy in the cubicle or whatever, doing your thing.
Yeah.
Embracing family economy. What was the change that you experienced with your wife, with your children?
Yeah. Well, let me answer it by saying it this way. We moved out to this farm here. We live on 10 acres in southern Minnesota, and we moved out here almost 11 years ago now. And originally it was a hobby farm in the literal sense. It was a hobby. Like we wanted to get some chickens. We lived in the cities and we couldn't do that there. And we wanted to have a much bigger garden and we just didn't have the space.
Sure.
So I was more curious of this kind of a way of life. And I didn't intend to change my career. I didn't plan to become a farmer. I mean, none of that stuff was on my mind at all. I really worked hard to get to where I was. I had a software business. So when we first came out, that's all it was. It was just, let's have some fun out here. Let's play.
Sure.
But one of the things that would happen is, so we would plant the gardens. First thing that we did is plant apple orchard.
Oh, wow.
And it was so fun. We got like a dozen apple trees. Actually, let me think about that. No, 15 apple trees. We now added 4 plums. But, going out and digging the holes, planting the trees, the truck shows up. We're out there. The whole family's out there putting this together. It's a ton of work. Then you got to water the trees. You have to water these apple trees when you first plant them. We buy them as about 5-year-old trees. Put them in the ground. You got to water them every day, about 1.5 gallons or so per tree. So if times 15 trees.
Oh, wow.
I'm loading up these buckets, 5-gallon buckets of water in my truck, driving them out every day, pouring a little at a time.
Yeah.
Took forever, tons of investment. But you know what? We were doing all this stuff together. The kids would pile in the truck. We'd drive down there. We'd do all these things together. We'd harvest potatoes from the garden. We'd can tomatoes and make our own tomato sauce or salsa or whatever. All the things that we did on the farm, we did together as a family. And then it was time to go to my quote unquote real job. And I'm saying bye, to my family.
Sure.
I'm going to go sit at a keyboard and stare at a screen in my office by myself for the next, 4-6 hours. And I'll see you again when we get back to hobby time. And I just started to wonder, this is over a period of years that we were here. It just started to strike me like, I don't really want to leave my family for the majority of my day, for the majority of my waking life, in order to provide a living. Is there a way that we could work together?
Wow.
That was just kind of the original loose end that I started to tug on. So it was really the farm context, and it was living on the land and doing things together, created this desire in me. I made good money as a software programmer for many years. It wasn't a bad profession. There's a lot of opportunity. I was grateful to have it. But I could just see that where it was going, I was not able to be discipling my children, really putting in the time that I wanted to put in as a father for the very short time I have with them here on earth. And so to me, it seemed like the natural answer to that is to find some kind of career, some kind of vocation where we're working together.
Yeah, man.
And that was, awesome. It was that contrast that I started to look for another way about 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah. And just for our listeners to consider, for some people, this sounds crazy, right? And yet from Adam and Eve up until very recent, that was the norm, until the Industrial Revolution, things like that.
Yeah.
And as you're telling this story, there's these things popping up in my head that are like benefits. And so I want to rattle them off before I forget. You can't really apprentice your kids in your trade if you're in a cubicle somewhere else. And just to be clear, we aren't saying that if you have a job like that, you're sinning or you're not in God's will by any means. We're just saying, let's think outside the box and be open to God moving, right? So you can't really apprentice your kids in that. Also, the issue of time is huge. One of my favorite sayings is the way a kid spells love is T-I-M-E.
Yeah.
Right. And parents today, I think more than any other time in history, and that might sound extreme, but I think it's true, spend the fewest amount of time with their kids. Would you agree with that on a whole?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And yet when we do spend time with our kids, typically it's shoulder to shoulder time, or it's things that aren't bad, like, sitting and watching a movie. That's not a bad thing in and of itself. Going and watching your kids play t-ball, that's not a bad thing, but it's not that quality time. Whereas when you're talking about digging up potatoes in the garden, I'm picturing all your kids and you and Becca with, getting your hands dirty.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something about, right, connecting with the earth like that.
Well, it's work and it's meaningful. Here's the thing about with our kids, they know when they're needed and they know when they're a nuisance. And when we give our kids chores that are kind of just busyness chores, just like go clean your room, go, watch your kid's sister, just stuff to kind of get out of my hair, get out of my way. I've got work to do. They know that that's like, they're getting in dad's way. He's got more important things to do than us. If you have a job where your children are part of your vocation and the things that they're doing with the family, with your business, with your vocation is meaningful bottom line kind of stuff, like We eat because you harvested those potatoes.
Mhm.
We're eating this meal now. You did that, kids. All that time weeding in the garden. Remember that. You got to be very intentional about connecting the rewards
Sure,
with the
connecting the
work.
dots, yeah.
But they know when they're needed,
Mhm.
and that does so much for a kid's self-esteem to say, you know, I'm part of this family. I'm needed. I'm important. I'm not a nuisance to mom and dad. You know, they're not shipping me off to
Sure.
another school system just to kind of so they have free daycare.
Mhm. Yeah.
This is something that's really meaningful, and I'm contributing. And so I think it's really important to be thinking in those kinds of ways, because we have, like you said, we have such a short amount of time in this world. A stat that I reference in the book is um, the average dad spends 5 hours a day watching television and 30 minutes a day with household children.
Wow. Cool.
No, that's
Sucker punch, man.
that's average. So some
Sure.
people do less, some people do
Do
more.
more, yeah.
But the thing is that we have never lived in a more divided time in human history than
Yeah.
we do right now. The family is more divided. Listen, dad's away at work all day, most of the time. Mom oftentimes works outside the home. The
70%.
children, if they're in public schools, they're in different classrooms.
Mhm.
If it's a Christian family, they're going to church. Guess what? You have children's church. You have the adults in another
Mhm.
church. They're not
Yeah.
even worshiping in the same place. You have a youth group. There's a youth pastor training up their kids rather than dad.
Yeah.
Right? What happened? This is very unusual.
Yeah, this is very
I mean, we're
yeah.
talking 5,000 years of human history. We didn't live this way.
Yeah.
The family was the center. They
Mhm.
did everything together. You mentioned watching a movie or Little League baseball. That's one part. That's called recreation. That's one part of the family economy. But the family economy is discipleship, mentorship, childcare, elder care, work,
Mhm.
worship.
Yeah.
It's all of the things that come together. If you don't mind me going off on,
Please.
I keep
Hit
thinking
it.
that back in the 17th century, you know, the Pilgrims and the Puritans, John Gouge said that the family is a little church and a
Mm.
little commonwealth, a church and a commonwealth on which the church and the commonwealth, the independent commonwealth, rests. So in
Wow.
other words, the family is a microcosm of the larger society. Guess what? You have the family breaking down. Guess what happens to the larger society?
Yeah.
Can we see what's happening
Oh,
in the
yeah.
larger society? Can we see what's happening in our churches? Right. So you have all of these things, and you trace it back. You bring it back to the family. What's going on? Why are we so divided? Did
Mhm.
God intend for families to live this way all the time? No. When he gave the call to Adam and Eve, that was a family. Take dominion came to a family, not a
Wow.
CEO, not a chairman of the board, not a government agency.
Mhm.
It was a family that was supposed to do these things and walk it out together. And why did he do that? Because it was in the context of working together that you build those relationships.
That's awesome,
Deep
man.
bonds. And that's how the generational faith happens. It goes from one to the
Yeah.
next.
So this is, I think of John the Baptist preparing the way for Christ.
Amen.
His job was to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children,
Yes.
hearts of the children to the fathers. And
Yep.
so there's, for our listeners, they're on board with the reality that Satan's attacking the home.
Yeah.
Why? Because the family's the building block
That's right.
of all society.
Yep.
So this is good, because what the way God's used your ministry in my family's life is, God's opened our eyes up to being together as a family, time together as a family, home education.
Yes.
Right. Unplugging from just a lot of things that keep us busy, but aren't productive. But now it's like, okay, let's take it another level. How can we work together?
Yeah.
Right. Not just learn together academically.
Yeah.
But how can we work together? What skills can we have? Today, your firstborn son gave a presentation on his rabbit business, right?
Yeah, right.
So now it's not only that you guys have your farm and you're doing your thing, but your young men and women are now have this spirit of entrepreneurship where they want to contribute to the economy. So he's breeding rabbits, and he's going to be selling the meat. He's going to be selling
eating
rabbits.
the meat.
Eating the meat. And we had another family here today. The young kid, maybe 9 years old, is raising chicks.
Hatching chicks.
Hatching chicks. And it's like, man, this is cool. This is taking the thing when we were kids of selling lemonade on the street, which is great, to a whole new level.
Oh yeah.
So
definitely. And you think because of the modern school system, I think we really have dumbed down, or I should say we underestimate what kids are capable of.
Yeah, true. No
Kids
doubt.
here's a crazy thing. There was no concept of teenagers in
Yeah.
in
Preach it,
prior
brother.
times.
Yeah.
The term teenager did not come up until after the Industrial Revolution showed up.
1930s.
1930s, way
1930s,
after the
man.
Industrial Revolution. If you go back and you read some of the Pilgrim and the Puritan literature, you basically had a child, someone was considered a child until he was about 7 or maybe 8 years old. From that point on, he was treated as someone who's becoming an adult. He's starting to join dad in the trade, the family trade. He's getting trained up in how to do practical things. And by that time, that kid is like 13 or 14 years old. He is completely capable of surviving on his own. Now, they didn't leave the family all the time. They often would apprentice with a master. But certainly by the time like 16, 17, 18, they are launched. But the point is that the work begins at the earliest possible age. 3 and 4 years old, you're beginning to train them up into meaningful work. By 8, 9, 10, they're starting to make some decisions for themselves about how they're going to grow their business, what their future careers might entail. And you're just guiding them as you've seen God gift them, because every parent knows better than anybody, certainly better than any public educator or any, a skills assessment test. They know what their kids are gifted at, and they can help guide their kids into meaningful careers that way.
That's awesome, man. So what you're saying is, and this is a powerful point, the idea today is kids are expected, because of the lie of adolescence. Kids are expected to be leeches. You're saying that historically, and more importantly, biblically, young children, 6, 7 years old, are expected to contribute
absolutely
to the family economy.
Absolutely. I mean, the education is, as we've talked a lot about this weekend, education is lifelong, but you don't delay the maturity by telling them to sit bolted into a seat until they're 18, 19, 20 years old, and then say, go out and have a work ethic in the general marketplace. No, they need to have that work ethic being developed by the time they're 8 years old. They should be involved in some meaningful occupation. Now, am I talking about child labor, breaking child labor law? No. I'm saying mom and dad, you know what your kids' capacities are. You know what challenges them. Sitting them in front of television, video games, or meaningless work and meaningless chores, or even, I want to say, if I can poke a bear, sports. A lot of the sports association stuff, that's a different form of daycare. It's keeping your kids busy with stuff that is not actually going to contribute meaningfully to their career. I have no problem whatsoever with the sports. I'm just saying it can get to such an extreme where the recreation crowds out a time where you're really supposed to be shaping them and forming them.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. I mean, you have this window. Public education takes up about 12,000 hours. You have 20 hours a week of sports. And man, if we could go back and relive that, I mean, when I left the home, I didn't have any skills.
Same.
You know what I mean? And it's like, but dude, we had plenty of time.
We had
thousands of hours. It's powerful. So something that we've observed is that kids are born into this world wanting to help mom and dad. Like a 3-year-old. So, you put a chair up to the sink. A 3-year-old, a 4-year-old will get up there and try and help wash dishes. Now, they might slow you down. And that's where we fall into that trap. But it's like, no, the important thing is not the work. The important thing is the child. Going into that. So, hey, here's a stat that you might not know. Well, first of all, no, okay, I'll go ahead and give it to you, and then I have something to say. Okay, so here's something you might not know. I'm going to try and give Rory Groves something about family economy that he doesn't know.
Awesome.
You've heard of Adam Smith. He wrote Wealth of Nations. Do you know what he said was the first step to being prosperous?
I don't.
Have as many kids as you can.
No,
that's
nice,
what he said.
Nice.
Have as many kids as you can.
Nice.
And see, now that today people would laugh at that. They'd scoff at that, but it's like, no, that's a great idea. These are, I mean, many hands make light work, right?
So here's the thing that I've noticed. This is not just in our family. You mentioned my oldest son, Ivor. He's 12 years old. By the way, he handles all of the farm chores around here. Not all, but most of the daily chores. We have sheep and goats and chickens and rabbits and some other things. But he handles a lot of that. He's one kid that's starting to develop his own business that's part of our economy, and we're giving him the context to do that. Our other kids, Elsie is very interested in knitting and sewing and all things tailoring, and we're trying to help her, develop that skill. She's 10. Our 7-year-old Hattie loves babies, and Honestly, I think she's going to become a midwife. I don't know.
That's awesome, man. That's
But
so cool.
what I've seen in other families who've been practicing this for generations is their family economies have exploded by the third generation. They are involved in so many businesses, and there's such a support network set up. Like one of the kids we want to become builders. Great, let's get you up and running. We've got the capacity, we have the knowledge and the expertise. We're going to plug you in and help you succeed in life. As a family, we're going to help this thing get off the ground way before you pick a major in college. It's not at that point to start thinking about life and career. But when you see this thing work out where the father's heart turns to his children, and then those children rise up in that family and they have children of their own, and they're expanding out 5, 6, 7 kids, maybe, over generations, that family is a powerhouse. And I've seen it time and time again. That's to the third and fourth generation. And it's very powerful. You see the faith is getting passed on. The children are getting discipled. They're working together, and they just have bonds that really, there's a lot of darkness in the world, but when it says in Isaiah, arise, shine, for your light has come, for darkness will cover the earth, deep darkness the peoples, but the light will rise, and it will be seen upon you. There is something about that shining family that is so bright in a dark world. It kind of doesn't matter what the darkness is doing, because the family is emanating its own light.
It's such a testimony, man. I mean, that turns heads, and people, their eyes are opened, right?
Amen.
That's something that God's doing. So we're going to wrap up with some practical tips. But first, tell us about the word economy. Break that word down for us.
So the word economy this is from C.R. Wiley, has done some good work on this on the household, and I recommend his books as well. But he pointed out that our word for economy, right, we were talking about that originally, comes from the Greek oikonomia, which means household management.
Yeah.
And so there's this understanding that the economy, all it ever was the household. In the beginning, Chris writes, it was all in the household, the whole economy. And the paterfamilias, the father, was the head of that house. And it was his job to marshal the talents of that family into a healthy independence. And so this idea, our word for economy, up until just very recently, had always meant a household.
Dude, that's crazy, because good Christian people, I mean, well, I'm not saying I'm a good Christian guy, but I'm trying to be.
You're a good Christian
but thanks, bro. People like me hear the word economy, the last thing we'd think about is the family.
Right.
And so what do? We always complain about the economy.
Yeah.
And we have this opportunity.
Yeah.
We have these little Edens.
Yeah, you do.
And when you look multi-generational, man, you can really turn the tide. I heard of a family, which I know you have story after story. I heard of a family that had a handful of sons. One was a carpenter, one an electrician, one a plumber, one, I think maybe even concrete guy. And it's like, dude, those guys can just have so much freedom.
Yeah.
And I mean, and really, this is where it's at. The world idolizes this dream that's so empty of just having wealth without working, or just a life of ease. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about fulfillment comes through work.
Absolutely.
And
meaningful work.
Yes, meaningful work. Not just doing something that isn't family integrated to pay the bills. I mean, very often we have to do that, but being open to seeking and asking God to help you find a way to do work as a family.
Yeah. And one thing I would talk about that practically, I know there's a lot of guys out there who might be listening to this and saying, yeah, but how many chickens am I going to have to sell to, replace my income as a software developer? And I get that. It sounds like an insurmountable challenge. I want to say one thing though on that. If God has put a dream on your heart, if this is something in you is stirring and you're like, I want that, but I don't know how the economics work out. Look, the ancient Israelites stood before a sea called the Red Sea, and Egypt was barreling down on their heels, right? He puts people in impossible situations so that he gets the glory when the seas part.
Yeah.
So if that's something on your heart, don't worry about how the economics work out. Just start moving ahead with the next step in faith and trust the Lord to provide the next step and the next step until you find yourself across the sea, because we have seen God part the seas for many families. There's a family here today that they were sharing their story about how they ended up on land that there's no reason or rhyme why they could afford to get this land, but it came in across their way through a distant relative and who wanted them to have the land because he wanted someone, a good believer, to steward it. And it was a dream that was fulfilled, and they're on the land now, and they're able to start putting their kids to work, and they're able to work together as a family, and they're moving along the way. But I'm just saying, we have heard so many testimonies of how people have crossed the sea, but it begins in faith. And it really begins with that mindset is we're going to find something, we're going to reclaim this economy for our own family. Mm-hmm. And so what I want to say to that father who's like, I can't quit my job and sell chickens or sell eggs or farm or things like that. It's not about that. It's about starting with what you have, where you have, and you can do something. Everybody can do something together with their families, grow a garden, get some chickens, do something, make some craft and sell it at a farmer's market. Yeah. Just start to try, most of what we do here at the Grove said, we're just like throwing things out and seeing what sticks. Mm-hmm, sure. My son today was selling plants and that seeds that he started. And he was selling like wooden crayons that he carved. They insert a crayon in it and make them out of branches. And my daughter was selling hats that she knit. And my younger kids were selling cards they made. And I told the kids, look, we don't know like if this is a good idea or not. Even us holding this fair, we don't know if anyone's going to show up to this thing or not. We're just trying stuff. Yeah. Right. And these are things that every family can just try. And this is what I would challenge you. See if the Lord does not bless your efforts. When you come together as a family, I believe you are locking in step with God's design for your family. And I believe that there is a blessing inherent in that, and that God will bless it, and see where the blessing takes you.
Dude, that's awesome. So to be clear, this isn't saying you have to change vocations tomorrow. This is about
and I wouldn't recommend that.
Starting to get more involved as a family.
It might take you several years to figure out what God has called and designed your family to do. My wife likes to talk about do the math. Sit down with dad and say, what are dad's gifts, dreams, abilities, education, talents? What did you want to be when you grow up? What are these things inside of you? And then say the same for mom. There we go. The rooster's crowing. What is mom's dreams? What are her talents? What did the two of you make together as one flesh, right? When God brought us together. And then bring your children on board with that equation. What do your children from the different ages, what are they gifted at? Parents know these things. You know the strengths and weaknesses. And do the math. What does your family add up to that is unique to your family? And what is God maybe calling you together as one family, as a single vision, rather than everyone going their separate ways, taking a job together because it makes this much money. Mom will take a job because it makes this much money. Not any rhyme or reason as having a vision that's shared, but just because there's dollar signs attached to it.
We value the dollars more than the time and the multi-generational. Some practical tips that are popping up in my mind. Tell me if this is on board with what you're saying. Is there might be a dad that has a business and he's never really considered that he can bring his children on that. So if he's a builder, or whatever it might be. And also this might be something where your vocation stays the same, but you start in your spare time doing as much as you can with your family. Obviously your wife, Lord willing, being able to be a stay-at-home mom, implementing these things in your absence. And it becomes a multi-generational thing where it might be your children that with your grandchildren experience this in a vocational sense. Is that fair?
Well, so the family economy is not just work, but work's an essential ingredient to it. It's also worship and wisdom. We talked about that.
Dude, okay, worship. Thank you for that. Give us the family economy implementation of worship.
So worship. I mean, we practice. I have to credit others who have guided us to this path. But we do family worship every single day with our families. We sit our kids down after supper. We sing a hymn. We read a scripture. We talk about it, and we pray together. But it's a discipline that we have part of our every single day. If we come home late from some family gathering or going out somewhere, we never skip family worship. I mean, maybe if the younger kids are asleep, we'll carry them up to bed.
Really quick, do a prayer.
But we make it a priority because it's so important that a family recovers that practice of worshiping together in the home. And so there's worship, and then education. Home education is, I think, probably the best way to recover. That's that aspect of the family economy. If you can home educate, I would strongly encourage you to do so.
Yeah.
Like you said, you're going to recover 12,000 hours of discipleship time, but more
Yeah.
importantly, it's going to be your mom and dad's influences, passing on your faith and your values to your children. So those are things that dad can still stay in the same
Yeah.
vocation if he wants. You can start to build up these other areas. But I would just, encourage you for looking for different ways that you can start to work together at the same time and see what has God called your family to do that is unique to your family, that he's gifted you for, because he has put a calling. When he calls man and wife together as one flesh, there's a calling on that. It goes all the way back to Adam.
And so there's going to be unique differences between, say, your family and mine.
Yeah.
But the one thing we all have in common is restoring the household order of the father, spiritually leading his family, educating with the help of his wife. And instead of seeing it as a home that's just a bed and breakfast with many members, seeing it as one unit.
Yeah.
One
You're all
unit.
going the same direction.
Yeah.
God has that vision. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, hey, man, this was good. This is very good. So once again, Rory Groves. Okay, so Durable Trades is the name of the book.
Yeah.
And the ministry is Gather and Grow. And so tell us about website, how to get a hold of your book. What are the best ways to do that?
You can come to our website at gatherandgrow.us, and we have a newsletter that we publish quarterly, and it's kind of the best way to stay in sync with us. It's actually a print newsletter that we put together with the family. That's part of our family economy.
Would highly recommend signing up for that newsletter.
And we just share stories of either what we're involved with, what we're learning, or what other families are learning who are walking through this experience. And the main goal of the newsletter is just to encourage other families.
Awesome.
The book is available there. We have some audio resources if you want to download and listen to some talks and kind of just get some encouragement along these lines. And then we have events like what we did today.
It was awesome. It was
so
great.
We have multiple events that we host right on our farm every year. And it's a way to connect in person. We really like the in person. We like what happens when we have these candid conversations, and for what happens when these families show up. We've had people coming from 3 and 4 hours away
we had that
today. Just to hang out for a couple hours on our farm. So people are hungry for community along these lines, and hosting the events is one of the ways to try to build that community.
So really quick, want to share this story. The sun's setting on us.
I can see where it's getting darker and darker.
But so I was speaking a couple years ago at the Mache convention in Sioux Falls because of COVID.
Right.
And this guy comes up to me, this goofy guy comes up to me, hands me this book. He's like, goofy, handsome guy. He says, "Hey, you've got to read this. Hey, actually, hey, man, here's a book. Check it out." I was like,
you were talking my language, is why I was man, this guy's right up my alley.
And so I was like, okay, yeah. And open up that book and ended up making it a daily devotion so we have our morning devotions. In the evening, we just go through books. So I was like, okay. And we went through those trades and just, being a painter. Hey, that's something you guys could do. Or, innkeeper. That's the one Isaiah wants to do, man. He wants to have Airbnbs, and if you got land, you can do that. And here we are a couple years later, man.
So in the book, it's a survey of historical trades called family-centered economies that have stood the test of time. And what I just want to know, my background is in computers. I just want to know, what are my options? If I want to do something like this with my family, a career change, what am I going to get into that's not going to go obsolete in a couple years, or not going to be automated by artificial intelligence or whatever the deal is? I want to do something that's stable and pour my heart into that. And so this is a book that talks through, they're not all trades of like manual labor. There's other trades in there too, but just kind of in the broader definition of the word trade. But it's a resource for families if they want to kind of see what's out there. And it was originally a resource for us. Here's a stat. So right at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, right around the founding of our country, there were 70 distinct occupations. Wow. Of those 70 distinct jobs, 61 of them are still around.
Wow.
Today, there are 30,000 occupations. And the vast majority of those, basically all of those that were created over time, over the last few centuries, have gone obsolete over the same period of time. So all the jobs that we have today, all of these search engine optimizer and these really like obscure, like niche jobs, they're not going to be around. I mean, they're going to continue to evolve and change over time. But you have these durable trades.
Shepherd, farmer,
innkeeper. We were just talking about silversmith today.
That's awesome.
And there's a lot of ways that families can work together in these trades too, because they're historical.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome. I don't even know if they can see us anymore in here.
they probably
But
don't want
hey,
to see us.
let's do a follow-up podcast soon on AI.
Oh, there
Can
we
we
go.
do that?
Yeah.
Because AI, pretty
Yep.
sci-fi, but
Yeah.
not so much.
Yeah.
It's here.
It's here.
So, all right, guys. Hey, blessings to each of you. Thank you so much. Check out Durable Trades, Gather and Grow. Thank you for joining us with the Blessed Family, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.